A former Green Beret, our next guest earned a Silver Star for Valor, the Bronze Star, and a Purple Heart while in Vietnam. He holds a degree in speech communication from Metro College in Denver. He inspired many as a motivational speaker, published author, actor, singer, and poet. He owns Fluorescent Kennels in Colorado and is a life member of American Legion Post 171 in Cripple Creek. Please welcome Keith McKim.
Thank you, Commander Triola, distinguished guests, my fellow Legionnaires. My name is Keith McKim, and I'm a storyteller. I have a couple of stories to share with you today, but first I'd like to brag a little bit about my grandson. My grandson is 23 years old. He holds a full-time job down with the computer company. He's married to a beautiful woman. They have a little boy and a baby girl. He also attends night school at the University of Colorado in Denver. This last fall, he learned that he had to take one final class before he could graduate and get his degree, his bachelorate in advertising. The class he had to take was in biology. The final exam was in December, just before the Christmas break. When the students entered the classroom, the exams were on the desk face down. The professor stood in front of the class and told them that there were 10 questions on the test. He said that number 10 was the most important question and that it was worth 60 points on their grade. Get that one right and one more, and they passed the course. Of course, when they turned the test over, the first thing they did was go to question number 10. The question was simple enough. It was, name 7 advantages of mother's milk. My grandson began, and his first answer was, well, it's the perfect formula for the child. 2, it provides immunity from several diseases. 3, it's always the right temperature. 4, it's inexpensive, and of course that's important to a young family. 5, it bonds the child to the mother and the mother to the child. 6, it's always available as needed. Then, of course, his mind went blank, but he went back and he answered the other 9 questions and came back to this one. He looked at the clock. He had 1 minute left in the test. He still didn't have an answer. He paused and looked at the clock again, 15 seconds, and he quickly wrote down, and it comes in 2 attractive containers. Thank you. Our grandson got an A in the class, and I think he's going to make a fine advertising lawyer. You know, I'm not proud to tell you today that I've been married a number of times, but I can honestly say that not one of those divorces were my fault. I hear some Twitters out there and some doubt I can see in the women's faces especially. Let me give you an example. My third ex-wife was a romantic and a tech freak. She got one of the first iPhones when they came out. She learned how to text. She brought one home to me and taught me how. One day she was out with her office friends having lunch, and she texted me. She said, if you're eating, send me a bite. If you're drinking, send me a sip. If you're sleeping, send me your dreams. If you're laughing, send me your smile. If you're crying, send me your tears. I love you. Being a pragmatist, I immediately responded and I said, I'm sitting on the stool. Please advise. I promised you earlier that I had a story to tell you, so for a while, I'd like to get a little more serious. I was a Green Beret, and I fought in Vietnam with Mac V. SOG. Tonight, I'd like to tell you a little bit about SOG, then tell you the story of one of our Medal of Honor recipients. The stories that I write and tell are about the extraordinary men of SOG, MACV-SOG, Military Assistance Command, Vietnam Special Operations Group, codenamed the Studies and Observation Group. SOG was the best-kept secret of the Vietnam War, so secret it was labeled a black operation, meaning that its very existence was concealed, even denied, by the United States government. This top-secret unit existed for only 8 years, January 1964 through May 1972. During that time, it established tactics that are still in use today, and in the 8 years of its existence, it garnered 10 Medals of Honor for the Green Berets. 23 SOG men received the Distinguished Service Cross, the second highest award for valor in combat. Most SOG medals were downgraded by at least 1 degree in order to keep attention away from their top secret operations. Operations that were conducted across the fence. That is to say, across the international borders of Laos, Cambodia, and North Vietnam. There were 248 Medals of Honor awarded during the Vietnam War. Most of these medals were awarded posthumously. In fact, 156, 62.9%, were awarded posthumously. Army soldiers received the most Medals of Honor with 161, followed by the Marines with 57. 16 went to the Navy and 14 to the Air Force. Of the 161 Medals of Honor awarded to the Army, 22 went to Special Forces, the Green Berets, representing over 13% of all Medals of Honor awarded. Of the 22 awarded to Special Forces, SOG received 10 of them, almost half. At the height of the Vietnam War, there were over 600,000 men serving in uniform in Vietnam. Of the 600,000, only 4,000 were Green Berets, the Special Forces, representing less than 1%, yet they garnered 13% of the Medals of Honor. Consider also that of those 4,000 Green Berets, fewer than 10% a year volunteered for MACV-SOG's top secret operations. When you eliminate the administration, training, and support personnel, that number shrinks to about 108, the men who actually ran the missions that SOG is famous for. There were approximately 108 operators at any one time, spread over the huge areas of Laos, Cambodia, and North Vietnam, broken down into 3 command and control units, South, Central, and North. That means that there were about 36 operators per unit, tiny by military standards. You had to be recruited to go into SOG, and then only on a volunteer basis. Only the best of the best were chosen. Most soldiers, including most Green Berets, did not volunteer when they learned of SOG's high-risk missions and their high casualty rates. SOG teams operated alone, deep behind enemy lines, primarily in Laos, Cambodia, and North Vietnam, along the heavily defended Ho Chi Minh Trail. Generally, we operated with 6 to 12-man teams, 2 or 3 Americans, and 4 to 9 indigenous personnel, mostly Montagnards. We were opposed by thousands of North Vietnamese Army soldiers. Anyone who served as an operator is a hero. To jump the fence, as cross-border operations were called, required men of unparalleled courage. More than 100% of SOG operators were wounded, and 50% were killed. Yet they went again and again to face and defeat America's enemies. How can you get more than 100% wounded? Most SOG men were wounded multiple times, and after healing, most still went back across the fence, and all too often were wounded again or killed. Although 50% of SOG were killed, they had the highest kill rate in the history of the U.S. military, 158 to 1. For every SOG killed, the enemy lost 158 men. Any SOG captured was tortured, then killed. The North Vietnamese Army hated SOG teams, and there was a reward on each SOG head. There were 327 SOG listed as missing in action. None were ever released from the POW camps. After the war, it was learned from the North Vietnamese, both high-ranking officers and individual soldiers, that SOG was the most feared unit that the North Vietnamese faced. It's amazing that this tiny group of men could cause such trepidation and fear in the hearts of seasoned soldiers. SOG took orders directly from the Office of the Joint Chiefs of Staff in the Pentagon or from the executive branch of government in the White House. SOG was assigned only the most dangerous, high-value targets, targets that would cost the enemy dearly, targets that were sure to cost a SOG blood, if not his life. It has been estimated that SOG operations caused the North Vietnamese Army to divert up to 100,000 men for guarding and maintaining the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Those 100,000 men were kept from injuring or killing American soldiers in South Vietnam because they were so busy chasing after SOG teams. SOG carried out some of the most dangerous missions ever conducted by the U.S. military. There was nothing outside the range of SOG activities. SOG men would take on any mission. If your time was up and you could not run missions, if your courage ran out or you felt that your luck was gone, if you got too old or too disabled, if fear or worry distracted you or you could not concentrate, if you lost the confidence of your team, if you were simply too afraid to go again, nothing was said by anyone. You would step down and not lose the respect of your fellow SOG operators. A spot in the rear was found for you, perhaps in supply or operations or training, or upon your request, a transfer to another unit. SOG history is the stuff of legends. On April 4th, 2001, 29 years after SOG had been disbanded, the United States of America, through the U.S. Army, officially recognized the bravery, integrity, devotion, and sacrifice of its covert warriors. The unit was awarded the Presidential Unit Citation for Valor. This designation is equivalent to receiving the Distinguished Service Cross, the second highest award for valor in combat. Every man in the unit earned that reward. The citation reads, in part, the Studies and Observation Group is cited for extraordinary heroism, great combat achievement, and unwavering fidelity while executing unheralded top-secret missions deep behind enemy lines across Southeast Asia. In the end, as Vietnam collapsed, SOG was the only fighting unit left in Vietnam. During that time, SOG got 2 more Medals of Honor. MAC-B SOG is the most decorated unit of its size in the history of the U.S. military. A Green Beret, Roger Donovan, was the first man to receive the Medal of Honor from Vietnam. A SOG man, Green Beret First Lieutenant Lauren D. Hagen, was awarded the last Medal of Honor for combat actions in Vietnam. SOG also had the most highly decorated soldier in the history of the U.S. military, Staff Sergeant, later Robert Lewis Howard. Under penalty of prison, fines, and disgrace, Each SOG man took an oath, swearing not to reveal anything about their operations or their unit for 25 years after the end of the war. As the 1-0, the team leader of Recon Team Cobra, I, your storyteller, was a small part of that saga. Now I'd like to take some time and tell you the story of one of SOG's Medal of Honor recipients. The story I'm about to tell is a true story. It's the story of a hero. I'd like to begin by defining what a hero is. Not a dictionary definition, but the definition of a life of a man who I think we can all agree is a hero. A man by the name of Roy Perez Benavidez. Roy was born in 1935, the son of a Texas sharecropper. He was orphaned at age 10. He dropped out of school in the 7th grade. In his hometown, he was known as a dumb Mexican. This dumb Mexican was to become one of that rare class of warriors, a recipient of the Medal of Honor, the highest award the United States can bestow on its military heroes. Roy enlisted in the Army in 1952 at the age of 17. In 1965, while serving with the 82nd Airborne in Vietnam, Benavidez stepped on a landmine. He was evacuated to Brooks Army Medical Center, San Antonio, Texas, where he was told that he would never walk again. This dumb Mexican didn't believe the diagnosis, and defying doctors' orders, he began an exercise program on his own. At night, in the darkness, he would slip from his bed, and using his elbows and chin, he would crawl to the nearest wall. He focused his mind to the pain and numbness in his feet and into the pain of his toes until he could move them. Then he moved his feet and his ankles. Eventually, he hoisted himself up and stood leaning against the wall. Finally, he walked out of the hospital under his own power. Benavidez stayed in the Army and was assigned to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, home of the 82nd Airborne and the Green Berets. Despite continuing pain from his wounds, he worked hard and finally qualified for Special Forces, the Green Berets. In January 1968, he returned to Vietnam. On May 2nd, 1968, a Special Forces SOG team, Special Operations people, were surrounded by a hardcore North Vietnamese Army battalion. A battalion is made up of 4 companies. A company is made up of 120 men. This fight would pit 480 hardcore NVA soldiers against Roy Benavidez, 2 other Green Berets, and 10 Montagnards, 4 dead, the others all seriously wounded. At 1:30 that day, screams for help were heard over the radio in the commo tent. "Get us out of here! For God's sakes, get us out of here!" Benavidez was in the tent and heard the call. He grabbed a knife and a medical bag and jumped on the helicopter that would attempt to rescue the trapped team. When they arrived at the scene, the enemy were too numerous to attempt the rescue. The chopper retreated to a position about 100 yards away, 10 feet off the ground. Benavidez leaped from the helicopter with only his knife and his medical supplies. Landing on the ground, he was shot in his right leg. He got up and moved toward his comrades. A grenade blast knocked him down, shrapnel punching into his face and neck. But he reached the team and began treating the wounded, distributing ammunition and calling in airstrikes. He was shot again. Ordering the helicopter to come in closer, he got most of the dead and wounded aboard, then ran back to retrieve the last dead body. He was shot in his stomach. Holding his guts in with his left hand, he moved toward the helicopter, dragging his dead comrade. A grenade wounded him in the back and neck, knocking him down. He got up and kept moving and made it back to the chopper. It rose up off the ground, and the pilot was shot in the head and killed. The helicopter crashed. Benavidez pulled everyone, dead and wounded, from the burning chopper. Creating a defensive perimeter, Benavidez raided for the fast movers, that's the jet planes, to come in and conduct airstrikes. He also called for another helicopter to attempt the rescue. He kept fighting and encouraged the other wounded to fight until the helicopters could arrive. He was shot several more times. When the jets arrived, he directed them to their targets until the enemy got so close that he directed the jets to come in danger close. In military jargon, danger close means that the good guys are in danger of getting killed by friendly fire. The second helicopter finally arrived at the LZ, the landing zone, and Benavidez loaded everyone, dead and wounded, on board. Just then, a North Vietnamese soldier charged from the jungle and clubbed Benavidez with the butt of his rifle, breaking his jaw. Roy fought on and killed his enemy, but not before he was bayoneted in both arms. This dumb Mexican with a broken jaw, bayonet wounds in both arms, a bullet in his gut, one lung collapsed from grenade shrapnel, and a piece of shrapnel embedded in his heart, fought on with his knife and killed his attacker. Dragging the last of the team aboard the chopper, Benavidez saw two enemy soldiers charging out of the jungle. Picking up his enemy's AK-47, he shot them both. After counting the team to make sure that all of them were aboard, Benavidez let the crew pull him inside. Gunships had been ordered to rescue or escort the rescue chopper home. The gunship pilots reported that blood was dripping out of both doors of the rescue chopper and onto the floor below, the jungle floor below. Lying on his back, Benavidez held his guts in with his own hands for the 20-minute ride back to the base. At Loc Ninh, he was taken off the chopper, he was triaged, and placed with the dead. This 32-year-old son of a Texas sharecropper had just fought for 6 hours, suffered 7 serious gunshot wounds, 28 shrapnel wounds, a broken jaw, 2 bayonet wounds, a collapsed lung, and a piece of shrapnel embedded in his heart, was triaged and placed with the dead. But he was alive. His uniform was ragged and torn. His body was filthy. His intestines were exposed, covered in disgusting jungle slime. His body oozed his life's blood. His eyes were blinded from the dried black blood that covered them. His jaw was broken, but he could hear and he knew what was happening. He lay in a body bag, bathed in his own blood, as the doctor came over to feel each dead man's chest for a heartbeat before zipping up the bag for the final time. When the doc touched Benavidez's chest, Roy forced his head up and spit a bloody glob of goo into the doc's face. The surprised doctor revised Roy's condition from dead to he won't make it, but we'll try. Roy did make it, and he received the Medal of Honor for his actions that day. President Ronald Reagan said on the day that he awarded the medal that if this was a movie script, you would not believe it. Roy Benavidez is a hero and an inspiration to those of us who are in this fight to save our nation. And make no mistake, we are in a fight for the life and the soul of this great nation. I'd like to close by quoting General George Patton when he said, "It is foolish and wrong to mourn the men who are wounded and killed. Rather, we should thank God that such men exist. Thank God for men like Roy Benavidez, and for those of you who are willing to put your lives on the line for America. God bless you. God bless Roy Benavidez. God bless the American Legion. And God bless the United States of America. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. About 4 years ago, I received a note from Roy Benavidez's daughter. I'd like to share it with you. She wrote, "Thank you for this tribute to my father, Roy. I appreciate the time it took to do this and the effort involved. My father lived by the motto, duty, honor, country. He never considered himself a hero, but just a soldier who did what he had to do. Again, thank you for this. Yvette Benavidez Garcia." And I thank you for letting me share the story of an American hero, Green Beret Songman, Sergeant Roy Perez Benavidez. God bless you.